whether we're talking other post-employment benefits, which would be GASB 74 and 75, or if we think about the strip, which would be GASB 67 and 68. GASB, or the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, promulgates GAAP for all state and local governments. They address the pensions through a series of what I would call sister standards, GASB 67, which impacted CalSTRS, and GASB 68, which impacts the employers. We spent a significant amount of time talking about that key estimate and arriving at what that net pension liability is. You could think of that as the funded status, but it's different than what the actuaries will tell you because it's based upon GAAP versus a few slight different nuances. But ultimately, that $90 billion is not the liability of the trust, it's the liability of the employers and the non-employer contributing entities. And they are required to book their proportionate share of that liability. So you have over 1,800 non-employer or employer contributing entities. Each one of those entities have to book their proportionate share. In many cases, it's the largest single liability upon their financial statements. And their auditors, one, management needs to know what the number is, and two, the auditors have to be able to audit it. And without this service, in theory, you'd have 1,800 auditors knocking on your door saying, we need to see the information as it relates to our employer. This was kind of a best practice developed within the industry to say it is much easier to do it at a centralized location, one time, have the plan responsible for it and engage their external auditors to opine upon that, and then their auditors can ultimately rely upon that information. Probably not briefly, but...
So my last question, are they required to use these numbers, or if they believe a different number is more representative, would a particular district be allowed to not use one of these numbers?
Ultimately, so they are required to book the liability. But I would again highlight, just as we said earlier, that the financial statements here are the responsibility of management. Those financial statements of the LEAs are the responsibility of the LEA's management. So if they believed that the number was to be wrong, they can book what they believe best, subject to the audit test work performed by their auditors.
That's right. You guys get that?
Yeah. That's just...
That was really very well done for brief. And simplifying, I think, a complex topic. And if I recall, the requirement was put in place just several years ago. Is that right? 4 or 5 years ago?
I think 4 to 5, they've all kind of run together.
Right.
So.
I think I recall the first time that we calculated and published the schedules, and it was pretty, I think it was newsworthy at the time because it was the first time people were going to see numbers.
It was very newsworthy. Yeah. One, as we said, most of your peers follow this same best practice, but if for those who would recall, you guys were actually the first to issue these set of schedules across the United States. So again, a testament to management.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Anything else, Dr. Okay. Okay, so I think we have a motion by Harry and seconded by Karen to adopt the staff recommendation on ARM 109. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone from Crow for continuing to work with us in a collaborative way, but also maintaining the independence and the judgment that you bring that's really important to bring. And Craig, best wishes to you in your retirement. Enjoy your rides in your RV around the country. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll shift to item number 5, which I think is Larry and Julie talking about the management letter.
Yes, thank you. In connection with an audit of the financial statements, we heard our report today where the auditor said that they did not identify any material or significant deficiencies and no material findings. But sometimes they will make observations, and those are opportunities for us to improve or strengthen internal controls or to perhaps increase efficiency in our financial reporting processes. and they will prepare a letter for management, and that's what you have before you today. Now, it's not required for the auditors to present this because they are immaterial. They have no impact on the financial statements. However, for the sake of transparency, we present this, management presents this to the committee so that they can, be totally transparent and see that, yes, there were some little nuances that were identified. Management is working to improve those deficiencies that were noted here. And so we present this management letter to the committee. And so I think there are some, important items in here, yet many of them focus kind of on the level of precision. Right? And then also, as I indicated, they didn't have any impact to the financial statements. And Julie, did you have any comments that you'd like to make on this?
I think for me, it's just very helpful to get this information. It's not something we have to report to you, but it still helps us to improve our processes and our internal controls. So we still take this very seriously, and we see what kind of improvements we can make based on these comments. Overall, like Larry said, there's no misstatements in the financial statements that were presented to you as a result of these findings, but we're still going to enhance our processes and improve our reconciliations so that we don't get to a point someday where if we didn't do that, we would have more serious conversations we need to have with you about significant or material weaknesses that might be found by the auditor. So we do take this very seriously. We are making changes based on the recommendations, and we will report that back to you through Larry's reporting throughout the year.
Correct. And I just wanted to highlight one area on ARM 238. There was a deficiency noted with regards to the MPP program census data. And there's a statement in here about that there were duplicates and that there were names that were removed from the census. And so there were some duplicate member names that were identified, but the member was actually not removed from the program. So we want to make sure that that's clear, that this had no impact on our members or anything like that. It was just for actuarial purposes in the estimates that we perform. And so it was really kind of truing up and shoring up the information, but no impact to the members.
Thank you for providing that clarification. I have a question from Lynn.
Thank you. I also wanted to thank, the CalSTRS team for all the hard work and all that. It was really interesting to hear about the great coordination between all of the different business groups too within CalSTRS, and also wanted to extend thanks to the Crow team too for another great job. And I did have a quick question on the MPP program and talking about refining the census data. So how would you go about approaching refining the data? Would it be something related to, kind of the data prep program that's been going on in connection to Pension Solution, or is this a separate look at this?
You mean in terms of improving the census data for the program?
Yes.
Rick's coming up. Go ahead.
So Rick Reed, System Actuary. So what this item actually refers to is something a little bit different than I think what it appears to be. So what we have is a group of people who are actually in the program and receiving benefits. So this item does not refer to that group of people. So, all clear? So everyone who's receiving a benefit is in the census data. And they're approximately, 6,000 or so, okay? So what this item refers to is there are, out of the rest of the retired population of approximately 300,000, there is a group of people who will actually become a part of the program. It's all clear? So we don't know exactly who those individuals are, but they're very few because for the most part, the program is closed to anyone who has not retired before July 1, 2012. But there are some circumstances in which those people who don't fit that criteria can become a member. And one, if there were some issues related to how they were included, which goes way back to 2000, when they had to be a vote of the employer, they also had to vote, and they had some more regulations. Sometimes, many times, those regulations were not followed correctly. So the board has gone back and said, because the employer or some of the regulations were not followed, some individuals who did not really get an opportunity to make the selection can become part of the program. So that's the authority of the board to do that, is to put individuals in the program who don't necessarily meet the general criteria. There's a second criteria. So we have a rule that says that members can backdate their retirement back to 2012. So let's say I'm inactive, I haven't worked since 2010, for example. And now I'm coming up to retirement, and I go see a counselor, and they will say, you know, you can actually, because you have not worked or done anything since then, you can actually backdate your retirement to 2012, and then you can receive the paychecks from 2012 that you would have received had you actually retired then. Okay? So individuals who do that now may have a retirement date before the deadline. So now those individuals can also possibly become part of the program. So there are some individuals in the general pool of people who are not members that may become members. As a matter of fact, I think 2 years ago, we saw about 100 of those. So there were new additions to the program, even though the program is pretty much closed. So the idea is, how do we estimate those? Because we don't really do a lot of work in trying to figure out who those people may be, and they come from the general population. So what the actuary actually did was to take really the entire population of everybody else who's retired and have a very small estimate of the number of people who may become eligible. And in the actual valuation is listed as a little percentage. And if anybody wants to see it, we can look at that. So in the beginning, and I'm going to go back to 2000, so with a couple of them. In the beginning, when we looked at that, we decided, the actuary and I decided that instead of just taking the entire group of people, we would just try to make it refine it a little bit better. We would just get rid of people who retired after whatever the retirement date is. So we'll eliminate those people, and we'll eliminate people who have spouses. And the reason why is, and I'm going to mention a name that I don't think very few people around here knows anymore, Mark Johnson, who used to be the consulting actuary for Milliman. So when the program originally started, we didn't know how many people would be in this program. So we took a survey. And we took a survey and asked people, would you join this program? And we took that as the number of people who would be in the program, and we made our estimates based on that, even though we knew that was too high, because we understood that if you have a spouse, you could get Medicare through your spouse and would not be a part of the program. So there was a large estimate. So in our Milliman's little analysis, they just eliminate people who have spouses without regards to whether they could do, and then they make an estimate of the remaining pool of kind of the liability of that. So that was an estimation technique and not a census. And so this deficiency relates to the fact that, quote, some of those people were not included in their estimated method, but when they study and put a percentage, it's based on that group that excludes the people that are in the deficiency. So So the percentage is a little bit smaller than, higher than what it would be if those people were included. So the method that we use to make an estimate of the liability for that very small group includes the fact that we leave out spouses, members who have spouses, and people that are retired after 2012. But it's just a general method to do that, and the method for estimating that also is consistent with that population that we used. So another way, we just use the entire population and have a different percentage. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, that does help.
Does that
Yes,
now answer
thank
your
you.
question? Yes.
Let's see. Karen?
So if you're estimating, right?
Yes.
And you're estimating and your numbers were in the report, then Crow is estimating your estimation. I mean, I guess I'm not understanding how that works. And if they're saying that it was a misstatement on management's part,
Yes.
then that means that they have information that's higher than what management has. Or am I not missing,
Kroll have to
am I missing the
explain, but
point?
I'm not sure that they exactly said
I'm not sure that I'm asking the
that,
right thing.
Yeah, I wonder
Yes.
if either Julie or someone can, because I don't think that Crow said it was a misstatement. I think that what
Okay.
they identified it as something to look at in terms of whether there can be improvements made to
Okay.
how
To the census
how the
data.
assumptions
Okay.
are
And how that
are
census
made.
data is
Yeah.
used by the
That's all
actuary
that-
to determine
that's all
their
that is.
valuation.
Okay.
So it's the entire group of people we're trying to decide how many are going to come back based on the board's decisions and based on the fact that they can backdate their retirement. And because first of all, you don't know who's individual's going to
Right.
do that, you have to look at, you basically just kind of have to look at what's happened so far and try to make an estimate. But it's a very small number. I think a couple of years ago it was 100, and they're fewer than that. So, and that's going to continue to decrease because I don't expect in 2030, somebody retiring is going to backdate their retirement to 2012 and become a part of the program. So that number is also going to decrease, as well as the fact that there are going to be very few new members. So
Because they're not gonna be
it's a
around.
very small number, and it's just the method that was used to just try to take a stab at a very small number.
Okay.
Brenda?
Yeah, if I could just quickly clarify, we have no issues with the estimates that are going into the calculation of the total OPEB liability. So this is absolutely correct. This is all just about the census data and what we found in our test work. Through my lens, teachers' retirement law is quite complicated. I would say the Medicare premium payment program is equally as complicated. It was an additional benefit that was provided for a period of time to support everything that Rick is saying. I mean, I certainly can follow everything that he's saying because I've dug into the program. If you go back to that concept of materiality and look at CalSTRS as a whole, I mean, it's like the floor. It doesn't even show up. So this really gets back to management has engaged us to assist their employers with this net OPEB liability, which means the level of controls, they must be much more precise. There's no issue with what management's doing, but we found it, and so management likes us to report it to them. So just through my lens, I wouldn't be concerned. I think your questions are valid. I think they're really good questions. I thought Rick's explanation and Julie's support was appropriate and totally agree with that, but we don't have any issues with anything that's in the financial statements. Nothing was misstated in that regard.
All right, good.
It just shows that they're looking at the program very carefully when they come up.
Thank you.
with these
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rick. Are there other questions regarding this agenda item in the management letter? No? Okay, I think I just want to comment that, I think we've heard the word transparency a lot this morning, and I appreciate and encourage you to continue to share this kind of information, with the board and with appropriate management, because I think it, while it's not required, it's an important step that provides, I think, those of us sitting here on the committee with confidence in our ability to communicate and be aware of issues that you're working through. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving to agenda item number 6, it's our 2020 compliance plan and our compliance director update. think Cheryl's joining us.
Yes, thank you. The purpose of this is really to provide an update on kind of our current activities with regards to our enterprise compliance program and to introduce our 2020 plan for the committee. And as you may be aware, Cheryl Dietz has been serving as our interim director of enterprise compliance services since mid-August when the former director retired. And so I'd like to turn the time now over to Cheryl to provide us with an update.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate the opportunity to apply my experience to CalSTR's compliance program. I've also enjoyed working with the compliance team and want to acknowledge all their hard work and energy they put on making this compliance program continue to move forward. So upon accepting this role, one of the first things I did was I met with business areas that had that compliance expertise, such as HR, legal, ISO, investment compliance, and a few other programs, just to gain some insight and feedback on the compliance initiatives. This feedback was valuable, and I utilized that with the compliance or the requirements of the law and regulations, as well as our compliance risk profile, to develop a systematic approach to completing the 2019 activities in our plan. So I wanted to provide just a brief update on some of our progress on these initiatives. As you're aware, one of our initiatives was to implement a hotline, anonymous reporting hotline, and so we've now engaged a vendor to operate that hotline. Now we are partnering with key stakeholders to define roles and ensure we have their input on key decisions. We're also engaging the policy owners to develop an agreed-upon approach that considers their needs and ensuring that we standardize and update our policies across the organization. We've also worked with Grant Thornton to redesign our compliance profile, and that allows us to better align with the ERM risk categories. Through this process, we were able to map our compliance risks to the enterprise and branch risks. So our next step is to just identify the mitigation efforts over compliance risks to ensure we're not duplicating and that risks are adequately mitigated and monitored. We've also created a program for compliance monitoring that we're pushing and we're evaluating against leading practices before we implement our compliance monitoring. So with only 2 staff and over the last few months with these 2 staffs, I'm really pleased with our progress. We will continue working hard. We'll build a robust enterprise compliance program, and you'll see those activities listed in our 2020 compliance plan. Those are on, the plan is on ARM 246. And I'll just highlight just a few of the activities. We're really wanting to put a structure in place to support that hotline and ensure we have policies and procedures over case management and reporting before we launch. Then we're also going to implement our compliance monitoring over those areas that need to ensure that we're having adequate mitigations over our compliance risks. We're going to continue to promote and communicate on ethical and compliance culture, such as our See Something, Say Something campaign. And I'll continue with refining our risk assessment to ensure as new laws are adopted that we're including that in our risk assessment. So essentially, the overarching theme for enterprise compliance is that we're going to engage, coordinate, leverage, and educate. So we're going to make sure that we are engaging with the business areas on our compliance initiatives and seek that feedback. We're going to coordinate the compliance efforts that are across the organization. We're going to leverage any existing compliance systems, and we're going to educate and communicate on compliance-related topics that are applicable to our organization. So that I believe this is an ambitious plan based on our resources, but I'm confident we can successfully achieve this and continue to build a sustainable, mature compliance program. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just have a couple of comments and questions. So thank you very much. It's really great to hear about the progress that the programs continue to make through 2020. And Cheryl, I really look forward to working with you in your new role. So thank you for stepping into that role. I guess just a couple of comments, and then I'd also love to ask Dr. Yetman, if he has any comments or questions to add. But I think the work that you and the team are doing to work with enterprise risk management and, sort of integrate and make sure that we're being consistent in how we identify and assess and think about mitigating those risks is really important. Because I think when this program first started, there were questions I think that the committee had about, how does compliance work with ERM, working with internal audit, and a lot of the different kind of oversight and validation functions that we have within the organization. So making sure that those are consistent and coordinated, I think is really important, as well as the comments you made about leveraging, other activities and staff and functional areas within the organization. I think, again, that was one of the questions I think we had at the beginning was how does this lay over a lot of activities that are either already happening or that need to happen in different parts of CalSTRS. And so making sure that we're not being redundant or duplicative, making sure that we're not working at cross purposes with other activities within the organization, I think is important. So I'm glad that type of framework is in place. You commented that I think it's you and 2 other staff people, is that right?
At this time.
Okay. Are there any open positions that you're trying to fill?
Yes, we had 2 open positions, and that hasn't been my priority. My priority has been to keep the initiatives moving forward.
Sure.
And really looking at the structure and getting the right staff in those positions that will benefit the organization.
Great. Okay, good. Well, just continue to keep us updated on the program itself as well as on how you're doing with the staffing, because I think this is important, really, really important work for the organization, and we want to make sure that we've got the right people and the right resources supporting all of our efforts.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple comments there. So we have the 2 staff level positions, the part of the team, and then we also have the recruitment for the director has been out, and so it's out for a 30-day period. Final filing date on that I think is like December 3rd or 4th, somewhere in that area. And so we have done quite a recruitment effort there. We've posted on some of the Society of Compliance job bulletins, for example, with the Governance Risk and Compliance Council job bulletin, and so we're doing an outreach effort to try to get the best pool that we can in order to be able to recruit for a permanent position, permanent director there. But I do feel like there is a high level of collaboration that's going on throughout the organization, and we appreciate that support. And integrating these activities, as you said, we really stress the importance of that. One of our commitments is that, to the extent that we can, we're going to build into existing processes rather than bolt on a whole bunch of new processes and make it a whole separate activity, because it's like managing risk, managing compliance is part of our everyday life and our everyday activity, and so we really are stressing that.
Great. Anything to add? No? Okay, great. Okay, I don't think there are any questions on this item, so thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. So next we go to agenda item number 7, which is our 2020 Internal Audit Plan Risk Assessment. And Cheryl will stay here, and we've got Mike joining us. So Larry, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, great. This is our 2020 risk assessment that's performed for the purposes of developing our internal audit plan. And what this really does is help us to understand the risk throughout the organization, and based on our resources, helps us to prioritize on how we apply those resources. When you think about it, we have, over 1,750 employers, for example. And so how do we determine, which of those that we're going to audit this year? And the risk assessment process helps us do that, as well as the internal risks that we face in the organization, particularly with our strategic plan initiatives and all of our big projects that we have going on. And so helps us to really prioritize that activity. And so here today, we have Mike Dutel, who's our Assistant Director over the Employer Audit Program, and he'll share with us the results of that risk assessment. We really perform 2 different risk assessments, one for the employer audits and then the other for internal audits. And Cheryl will share that results with us as well today. So, Mike?
Thank you, Larry. For the employer audit risk assessment, we analyzed the payroll reporting data covering the last 2 school years, which is a tremendous amount of data, and we ranked nearly 1,800 employers using 12 different risk factors. ARM 254 contains a list of the risk factors and their assigned values and descriptions. Of the 12 risk factors, 3 relate to large increases from one school year to the next school year, and 3 factors relate to large increases, actually large amounts of compensation within a single school year. For each risk factor, each employer receives a weighted score up to 5 based upon the factor's potential impact and the number of known occurrences. For example, risk factor 5 is employers that reported one-time payments exceeding $1,200. So the greater number of one-time payments the employer reported, the higher the score for that risk factor. If the employer didn't report any one-time payments that exceeded $1,200, then that employer will receive a 0 for that factor. Table 1 on ARM 250 shows that 65 employers met the one-time payment $1,200 threshold for risk factor 5. The scores of the 12 factors were totaled and applied to each employer. The employers were then divided into high, medium, and low risk categories based upon their total scores, which is shown on Table 2 on ARM 250. Over the last few years, we have frequent audit findings that were related for special compensation, unused sick leave, and post-retirement earnings. Therefore, we plan to complete 52 limited scope audits specifically focused on those 3 areas. And for the special compensation audits, we're going to use the results outlined on Table 1, ARM 250, and select employers that were assessed as high risk under the 3 special compensation risk factors. And if you look at Table 1, you'll notice that there were 671 employers that received a score for risk factor 3, which is high amounts of reported special compensation. Now, that doesn't mean that there's social compensation was misreported for those employers. It just means that these employers reported special compensation that exceeded $2,500 for at least one member. But the potential of misreporting does exist, so what we need to do is go out there and visit that district to find out what those payments were for the special compensation items, make sure it complies with the retirement law and should be reported or not. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to look at risk factor 3, 5, and 10, which are the 3 special compensation risk factors. And we're going to pull the employers that ranked high in those 3 areas and low or not at all in the other areas. And we're going to make a selection of those employers for special compensation audits. And we're going to use the same method for our unused sick leave. The unused sick leave factors are 6 and 9. So we're going to select employers that ranked high in those 2 areas, low, not at all for the unused sick leave audits. In addition, we can plan to complete 35 full scope audits, and every employer has an opportunity to be audited. So we're going to select 23 employers that were assessed as high risk, 8 that were assessed as medium risk, and 4 that were assessed as low risk to audit. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I've got a question from Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I had a question. It looks like this year the number of high-risk employers dropped to about 250, and I think last year there were almost 370.
Yes.
What would contribute to a large movement like that in the high-risk category?
We deleted 1 risk factor and we added 2 risk factors. Actually, risk factor 10 and 12 are new risk factors. Risk factor 10 is for PEPR members. That was the Public Employees Pension Reform Act of 2013. You have to be a member on 2013 going forward. So we didn't use that since for our audit, we look at the last year or 2 years. So now we figure that there's going to be enough new PEPR members in there. So we added that. And number 12 is new employers as of 2017. And we dropped 1, I believe it was for the IRS limitations. There was for reporting compensation. STRS has a good policy to monitor that, so we felt there was good mitigation, so we dropped that risk factor. And also, which I found interesting, Risk factor 5, that the one-time payment, this year we used a threshold of $1,200. Last year we used a threshold of $1,500. So since we lowered the threshold, I kind of expected we're going to grab a few more employers in that. But interesting enough, and actually as a pleasant surprise, we found that last year there was 80 employers at the higher rate. We lowered it. Now there's only 65. We started the one-time payment limited scope audits a couple years ago, and we also found it in our full scope audits. And also, when we do have a finding, we notify the program, the business areas, and they go out and train the districts. And I think that's why we see a reduction in that, which I was happy to see, because CalSTR's training other employers.
That's great. So that's been such a positive impact of the limited scope audits then, that you've been able to really focus on that
Exactly.
training and
Yeah.
help the employers.
And I'd just like one clarification there is while we're looking at those new school districts, there's probably some less risk in there. However, when we're doing our data analytics and trying to focus in on those issues like special compensation and things like that, we do include those new school districts in there. So if we see any excess or risk above our thresholds that we set, we will include them. But for purposes of overall risk assessment, we recognize too that they're new, right? And so we want to give them a little bit of time to, be able to do good analysis on their reporting.
Sure, that makes sense. I had one other question too. I'm just curious, how often can a high-risk employer be audited? So is there a rule that you wouldn't go in more than 5 years, 3 years?
Yeah, what we do, actually, risk factor 7, that is employers that haven't been audited within the last 5 years, but that doesn't mean, if they haven't been audited, they'll receive a score of 1 for that risk factor, but that doesn't mean they're still going to raise up to high risk. So when we develop our audit plan, we look at the high risk. Actually, we weed out all the districts that we were audited within the last 5 years, which is about between 300 and 350. So we won't re-audit them within 5 years, unless there's a tip from the business area saying we see this problem or immediate attention, then we'll go out there. But normally, we won't re-audit someone within 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no rule per se, but we use, reasonableness criteria in order to allow us to apply our resources across all of the employers.
Thanks.
So I've got Karen next, but Dr. Yetman had a comment. May I have him go? Okay.
Just real quick. Hey, Mike, so, there we go. If I look at the distribution of risk across the K-12s and the charters, there's, about 700 charters, about 900 non-charter Ks. And the charters are disproportionately low risk and very few high risk.
Right.
And so just given the selection criteria, it might suggest that there would be a significant underrepresentation of charters in the pool of auditees. And so I would just say that, and that's a risk-based approach, which is appropriate, right? However, it would not be inappropriate to recognize that this particular risk-based approach will result in an underweighting of charter audits, and I encourage you to consider that.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Actually, you're absolutely correct. But now, since we started doing with our limited scope audits, a lot of these charter schools may rank high in one particular area and low in everything else, which brought them down to low, maybe medium. And actually, since in the last 2 years, we assigned 34 charter school audits. Okay. Most of them were 24 of those were limited scope audits.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. On the one risk factor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yes.
so we dial in on it, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that observation, and Mike for sort of talking about how we're, addressing it through the limited scope audits in a different way. So Karen.
Well, my question pertains to the training. We talked a little bit about the training of the employers and how that information, the auditors get the information that the district provides to them, but if the district is providing incorrect information, it just seems like we're finding out that a lot of the training at the district level or the employer level is not as I don't know what word I want to use, is robust or consistent or continuous, so that they don't fall into some of these errors that come up. So can you speak to the training portion of it?
I'll take that, Mike. Yeah, and so I think that's a great question. It's something that we're focused on as well. In fact, it was also part of the management letter that was presented earlier, where we're trying to continually work in the organization to enhance training. And so every time we have an audit, that is provided to our program area. And they will contact the employer and provide training on those issues in addition to their regular overall training that they provide. So they will, like we're focusing in on an issue, they'll focus in on that employer for training purposes. And then, as noted in the management letter, there's also some enhanced opportunities where, as we're implementing pension solution, for example, we're going to learn more from that experience and see how to work with the program area to see how we can realign that training to focus on those types of errors that are being identified. And then also, I think Jeff Zimmerman gave a presentation to the board that talked about some LMS video type of training that's being developed and trying to enhance the training with regards to the employers as they come on board with the pension solution. And so it's something that we are concerned about as well. We try to work with the program area on enhancing, the types of issues, enhancing the training regarding the types of issues that are identified in the audits.
But from right now, though, it's not mandatory training?
I'm
Or is that,
I'm not aware.
Jeff was just here a few minutes ago, he was wondering if this question was gonna come up, but Jeff Zimmer is the acting director over our member account services, and that's the business area where they do provide employer report training. So when an issue does come up, they contact the employer that they're dealing with and train them specifically. So it's not like we're gonna put together a training function and invite people. We engage directly with them to manage the corrections directly with the staff who are responsible for reporting to us.
but that's after the fact, though, right?
Yes, it is after the fact. And and what we're trying to do is mitigate any prospective reporting problems that we see in the future. So if we see something that's systemic in a county office of education or a district, then we want to make sure that not only we train them so that they report in the future accurately and they eliminate the errors in reporting that they're experiencing at that time. And then because the audit is looking retrospectively, but if it's something that's systemic that we see them reporting continuously, and we see that's a problem that's going to be in the future, we want to make sure that it's mitigated, through the audit, but it's not going to be reported inaccurately going forward.
Oh,
Yeah.
over time. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, I don't think there are any other questions on this item. Oh, I'm sorry, so now we go to Cheryl, right? Yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you. So as we mentioned earlier, Audit Services is coordinating with ERM and Enterprise Compliance this year when we performed our risk assessment. And we included, our approach included risk discussions with executive and directors. We considered the CalSTRS strategic and business plan objectives. We obtained input from ERM on our enterprise and operational risks. We used our internal audit knowledge on CalSTRS business processes and controls. And then we also understood, to ensure we understood the emerging and current industry risks. So we took that information and we rescored, or we took audit portfolio and we scored our activities and then illustrated our higher risk activities based on that scoring on a risk map at ARM 252. So from this, we plotted the higher risk activities and then evaluated based on resources and timing as to which ones we would propose for the 2020 plan. And you may note there's certain activities in here that were high risk that we didn't select, and that's because the activity may not be mature enough just yet, or there's other assurance being provided within the organization on these activities, or maybe it's already being addressed by management. So we said, well, let's give that some time and maybe have a potential future audit on those activities. Also, you may notice on this risk map that their investment activities are not on here, and that's because these risks are covered through a rotational audit cycle that reviews asset classes, investment programs, and our third-party master custodian, and they're on a cycle every 4 years. However, we do meet with investment management periodically, so if there was an investment risk that wasn't covered in these audits, we would put them on our cycle and ensure that we're mitigating those risks. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. I think there are no questions on this item. Okay, so now we'll move to agenda item number 8, which is, it's an action item. It's our 2020 internal audit plan.
Correct. Unlike the compliance plan that was presented to the committee for information, our standards require that the committee is presented and the plan for approval. And so I think what I really want to focus on is on ARM 257. Based on that risk map that was provided in the previous item, we have 19 different projects that are selected here, and it illustrates how these are really focused on the strategic goals and business objectives of the organization. It also focuses on our big projects, such as pension solution, pension funding, the headquarters expansion, and other high risks such as the investment area and information security. And so we're focusing on, I think, the things that are important to the organization and providing the committee assurance around the controls related to those activities. And so this would be our proposed plan, is included as attachment 1 to this agenda item. It illustrates how we're going to apply our resources, performing those 87 employer audits, sorry about that, Mike, 87 employer audits, and then also our internal audit activity and those that would be contracted as well. And so we contract out the more complex audits with regards to investments and information technology and information security. And so those proposed audits are outlined in this plan as well. I believe it provides good coverage across the organization that's consistent with our strategic goals and objectives. And so present it to the committee, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Dr. Yatman?
So I work pretty closely with Larry going over these audits, and we talk on the phone about, and I poke him, why are you doing this one? Why are you not doing that one? And at the end of the day, Larry always seems to win because Larry's always usually right. So unsurprisingly, I support this audit plan, and my recommendation would be for the board to support this audit plan.
Thank you. Let's see, I think I have a question from Harry.
No, I wanted to hear from Dr. Yetman, and having heard from Dr. Yetman, I'm tempted to comment on his comment about Larry, but I won't. So in lieu of that, I'll make a motion that the committee adopt the ARM, the internal audit plan for 2020 as it appears on ARM 257.
Great, is there a second? Second. Okay, thank you. Frank, second. Okay, thank you very much. So there's a motion to approve the staff recommendation on ARM 257. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we've approved the audit plan, and I do want to make a comment that, I'm sorry, but I did want to comment on the last item that, mapping, putting the items on the risk map, looking at, impact and, I can't remember what the other, yeah, thank you, was also really helpful just to sort of visually see, what some of the obvious priorities are that we should be focusing on. So thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I think Brian has a comment.
Sorry, the item you just voted on was actually an information item, not an action item. And so if that's...
So I think I might have kind of mixed the two. So we had...
Change it to action item. Okay, the version I had was an information item.
Oh, got it. Okay,
Thank
thank you for catching that. Yeah, and I think one was when the assessment was information, and the next one was an action. So I kind of blended the two. So
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9. It's our chief auditor update. Mary?
Yeah, just a couple of items I want to make sure the committee is aware of. As you can tell, we have a lot of activity going on. To date, we have concluded 73 employer audits, and our goal was 84 for this year. And so we are on track with that, and the team has done a really great job. I'm real pleased with the progress on the limited scope reviews and being able to expand the types of data analysis that we're doing and continue to focus on the limited scope reviews. Those are really important because they focus primarily on active members and it prevents problems, right? And that's what we're trying to really focus on. And then in the internal audit area, we've done some really important audits. We continue our emphasis like that was outlined in the management letter today with regards to internal controls over member data. We took another look at the controls around that. We're just getting ready to issue a report there. We're looking also at the controls with regards to pension solution user acceptance testing. And then one of our third-party administrators, TCG, and then actually, Ms. Yamamoto, we're concluding an audit of employer training, and we do have some recommendations that I think you'll enjoy and enjoy reading there. Also, we're getting ready to release an RFP, and that is for our vendor pool. And so our current one is about to sunset, and so we'll be releasing a new RFP, and that would be for audit firms coming into the pool for investment, IT, and information security audits and some of these more complex audits. And we hope to expand that pool beyond the number of auditors that we're currently using and get some other fresh eyes in here. And then finally, I just wanted to report back that I let you know that we were hosting the Association of Public Pension Fund Auditors Conference, and CalSTRS did a great job. Our team was highly acknowledged there. We had 88 folks attend that from 44 different pension systems across the U.S. One actually from Canada attended that as well. And our own CFO kicked off the meeting, and we had some really great discussions about the impact of IT and information security, big data analytics, and relative best practices across all pension systems. And it was really a great conference. And so. And then finally, we are getting ready for our quality assurance program peer review, and this next year included in the plan would be our prep work, and that's not due until 2021, but I want to let you know that we are focused on that too. Okay, thank you. Staffing. How are you staffed? Staffing? Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah, we do have, I'm sorry, Dr. Yetman asked me about staffing and how we're doing there. And so we do have a couple of positions that are vacant. We had a retirement in our employer audit program that we're backfilling that position. We also have a recruitment for a manager that took a promotion in our internal team, and we're backfilling that as well, and along with a staff level position there. So that was actually filled internally, and now we're recruiting the staff level position. So really relatively low turnover.
Yeah, good to hear.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's remarkable the number of things that you and your team are collaborating with others in the organization to do and to accomplish. So thank you for kind of reminding us about a lot of the work that's happening. And I think we're going to have popcorn at one of our future meetings to hear about the audit on employer training. Yeah. Okay, great. So review of information requests, agenda item 10.
I did not note any.
Okay, thank you. I didn't either. Agenda item 11 is our draft agenda for the next committee meeting. Larry, any comments on that? No? Okay. Then finally, just opportunity for statements from the public. Seeing none, I think we're adjourned. What time will we be starting board governance?
It's listed at 10:15.
Okay. Okay, so board governance will be convening.